You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you're listening to the Creep Street Podcast. Really quick before we get started with our spooky show today. Really quick, just wanted to remind everyone to please follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at Creep Street Podcast. Twitter, Creep Street Pod. We're on Facebook. Also, please feel free to like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends about us. We want as many people on this Creep Street train as we can so we can have a little cuckoo spooky universe. And so here we go. That's out of the way. We are ready. Dylan, what do we have in store?
Today, we are talking about Slender Man.
Slender Man.
This guy's a hotshot.
This guy is a big deal.
This guy's a big deal in the paranormal world.
Very spooky, scary.
Very scary.
With some real-life ramifications.
Real-life ramifications. And we're going to get into that right now.
For sure.
So the origins of the Slender Man, or at least for skeptics, dates back to June 10th, 2009. It started on a forum called Something Awful on reddit.com, I believe. The thread was called Create Paranormal Images. So it was a contest. You were to create your own faux images of the paranormal and post them. The purpose of this thread was basically creating your own paranormal character.
Right.
Was the goal. And you had to make it look as believable as possible. So one Reddit user, right before they did this, one Reddit user by the name of Slidebite even commented, "You just know a couple of the good ones are going to eventually make it to paranormal websites and be used as genuine."
Whoa. Okay.
That person was right.
Fortune teller alert.
One person who happened to submit to the thread was a Florida resident by the name of Eric Knudsen with a K. Knudsen? I'm going to say Knudsen.
I like Knudsen.
Maybe we'll call him Knudsen. Eric Knudsen.
Hell yeah.
Who operated under the Reddit username Victor Surge.
Makes sense.
And it is here in this forum that Serge submitted 2 photos he had created depicting the Slender Man, who would go on to become a goddamn rock star in the paranormal world.
Hell yeah.
Very huge. So
hell yeah.
Let's get into the description of these original photos. Both the original photos are in black and white and are said to have been taken in 1983 and 86 respectively.
Oh.
But both were released with captions that are supposedly quotes from witnesses. So the first photo is of a group of seemingly young teenage kind of tween kids, and they're moving in a group. They appear to be in some sort of like a state of distress. And most notably, the kid closest to the camera kind of has this scowl on his face. So there's indicating they look somewhat distressed. But behind these kids, standing near the tree line, is the image of a very tall, slender, humanoid figure. Mm-hmm. And the figure appears to be dressed in black attire with like a white button down. The head is kind of bald and featureless, and it appears there's no eyes, mouth, ears, anything like that. And only one child appears to be looking up at this figure. Mm. And this photo was released with the caption, "We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them. But its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time. 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead."
Presumed dead.
So the second photo is of a playground. This is the one I think I first saw of the Slender Man. So in this photo, there you see a bunch of kids playing on a playground, and there's your typical playground stuff. There's a slide. There's like a sort of a treehouse fort-looking thing. But standing far in the back is this tall, shadowy figure. It's standing in the shadow of a tree, and it appears as though the arms in this photo appear to have like multiple tentacle-like growths
like appendages.
Almost like an octopus.
Oh.
And this is where Victor Surge, aka Eric Knudsen. This was an unintentional stroke of genius in terms of making a character go viral.
Okay, so this is genius from the nut.
From the nut himself.
Okay.
Underneath this photo, the second photo, there was a paragraph that read, "One of 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken the day which 14 children vanished and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformities cited as film defects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated for evidence. 1986. Photographer Mary Thomas. Missing since June 13th, 1986.
Oh.
This is brilliant.
Good details here.
Because what he is now doing is saying, he's essentially creating a character that's stepping in to say, nothing to see here. This was all just deformities in the film.
Right.
Everyone's all good. Then he adds the note that this person disappeared. It adds that certain, nothing makes people believe in UFOs more than when someone shuts it down saying, no UFOs here, nothing to see. That only makes their interest, their fascination grow. And it's kind of, that's kind of what he did with this post.
Exactly.
In that regards, it was kind of brilliant.
Right. Especially saying too, like, oh, the police or what else did they say? Who did they say said that about the picture, that it looked like it was fine? It was like officials or something said that it looked fine.
Exactly.
So it's like when they say that, but then they say that the original was confiscated by the police for evidence, that kind of gets your
right. It sets the
gets
hook.
you going a little bit more.
It's like at the beginning of Blair Witch Project when it says they make it sound like this footage was found, and
it makes it seem more
right.
real. Yeah.
By doing that, by adding this element of they don't want you to know.
Right.
It adds this layer of paranoia.
And then it also kind of like makes you feel like you're in the know, because you're like, oh, I know something that the government doesn't want me to know.
Exactly.
And that's like exciting.
Exactly. And the thought that there is someone wanting to keep you from learning about something
right.
only makes you want to learn it more. So, stroke of genius, really. So here is the description of the Slender Man.
Pop off.
Because of the nature of Slender Man as an idea, his description can change from story to story in a way to fill out the needs of the tale. Now, what's constant is Slender Man is being described as very tall, very thin, obviously, with unnaturally long arms that sometimes are described as having tentacle-like appendages, which they can extend to either capture or intimidate his prey.
Yikes.
His face is described as white and featureless, but can appear differently from a person-to-person basis. Perhaps a specific person or persons targeted by the Slenderman see him differently, and I thought maybe that's a way of, if he's not who he's targeting, maybe all you do see is that white visage
right.
of no features. Because maybe if you think, if his whole MO is, abducting people,
right.
you would think maybe he would try to appear something that the child or person would not be afraid of.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And
Whereas
I think,
other people just see it as this sort of ghostly...
Right. Like it doesn't look scary
figure.
to the person that is his prey or whatever.
Exactly.
And I think this also makes it scarier for people too, because you're not 100% sure what he does look like.
Right.
So that can make it can kind of scare you more when you're like, oh, I just saw someone over there that looked kind of weird, but it didn't look exactly like it. But I guess it still could be Slender Man,
Right.
Makes it a little more
exactly
spooky, a little more ominous, I think.
Exactly. So he's described as wearing a dark suit with a tie. He's associated with heavily wooded areas or abandoned locations. Often he's described as having the ability to teleport. And it is said that when you are in close proximity to the Slender Man, you are overcome with what they call slender sickness, which is described as sudden paranoia, nightmares, delusions, and nosebleeds.
Oh, scary. Weird.
So, yeah.
I've also heard that his face kind of looks gauzy, is what I've heard. Like almost like it's like
it's wrapped, almost like a mummy or something.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And everything I've seen kind of, yeah, you're right. It almost like, even if it's not gauze, maybe like some sort of, almost like a ectoplasm.
Right, like it doesn't look like it's just like a head with no face. It looks like it's
shrouded.
Yeah, in some way.
Exactly. That's a good point. Very good point. So needless to say, the Slender Man became very popular very quickly, went viral. Today, there's no shortage of stories, fan art, movies, and even video games. I have one of the Slender Man video games.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pretty spooky. Notably, forum user Thoreau Up created a folklore backstory for Slender Man.
Yeah, what a great name.
Set in 16th century German, and sculpted it as if it were real, implying the Slender Man is actually an entity that has always been there. That's a big thing. And we're going to come back to this because at the very end, we're going to talk about what this Slender Man may actually be.
Oh.
So early stories of the Slender Man obviously featured him targeting children or young adults. Many center around young adults who are either driven insane by the Slender Man or forced to commit acts on his behalf. An important point to be made, though, in the lore of Slender Man is that anyone investigating him will draw his attention.
Oh.
Yikes.
Okay.
A symbol for Slender Man was created by a web series called Marble Hornets, and this symbol is very widely used in Slender Man lore. It's an X surrounded by a circle with the branches, the arms of this X protruding out of the circle.
Oh, got it.
And it must be noted, when it comes to Slender Man stories, very uncommon for there to be a lot of violence or gore. It's more based on the ambiguity of this creature and what its intentions really are.
It's more like the promise of violence more so than their actually being acts of violence.
Exactly. But unfortunately, Slender Man has led to very specific acts of violence, very unfortunate ones. The most famous happened in 2014 on May 31st in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
This is so fucked up.
It's so messed up. There's a wonderful documentary on HBO called Beware of the Slender Man, and that documentary goes into just the nooks and crannies of this case.
It does such a good job.
It does a very good job. I'm only brushing over it quickly because that, like I said, obviously that documentary is more about the people involved, the victims and the perpetrators. I could go into that in length, but really I want to keep it to the core of what Slender Man is.
Yeah.
But I will glance over it here. So on May 31st, 2014, two 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, lured a fellow 12-year-old classmate into the woods by saying they wanted to play a game of hide and seek. There, the two girls held the third girl down and stabbed her 19 times. The girls then told their victim that they would come back with help. They obviously didn't. They left her there. But if there's one bright spot, the victim did live. And she's still alive today. She's still alive today. The victim lived. She crawled. She was able to crawl out of the woods to a nearby road where she was found by a cyclist.
That is so horrifying.
It's horrifying. And the documentary is just, it's kind of depressing. Because
it's very sad.
It's about kids getting hurt, and it's also about kids hurting other kids. And it's just, it's a great documentary, but it's a bummer.
Yeah.
And really, it kind of kept me off researching this just because it's like,
I know, I get it.
It's just a bummer. When kids are involved, it's always a bummer. And check out that documentary. It's excellent, but that is just the sort of the long short of it.
Well, that one is so interesting and weird and scary because it's so easy to watch this or watch the documentary and be like, these kids are ridiculous. I can't believe that they would ever think that Slender Man is real or ever think that any of this would work or happen or anything like that. But I think it's very important to note is that it's kind of like a thing with these creepypastas online, especially with Slender Man, where it's like everyone is playing along with it online, which is totally fine. I don't think there's something wrong with that. I think it's like, it's all in good fun and people are, like telling scary stories and we're doing that too. I think that's great. But like, it's hard when young children read these things because they don't have they literally don't have the brain capacity yet to say, oh, okay, even though this is online and it's coming from many people online, it's not true. Like they can't figure that out. And then also the girls that did this had some mental health issues and maybe even some
they did
psychopath or sociopath tendencies. Very sad.
Right. And the creator of Slender Man, Knudsen,
our boy Nut,
he was even briefly commented on the incident and obviously said he's horrified and feels terrible for everyone involved, but has chosen not to discuss it further, which I understand. I totally get. This is something he created for fun in a forum that was clearly outside. This is not real. This is like a thing, It's not his fault. It's not his fault. And I would, any of us would feel horrible if something we created that was meant to be fun and entertaining ended up leading people to, obviously, he's not to blame in all of this. No. So that's not we're not trying to bust his balls. This is, but this incident did lead to other incidents. It was a panic. It kind of set like a satanic panic.
Yeah.
Had a mini sort of Slender Man panic.
Yeah. And weren't the people doing this because they thought that Slender Man was telling them or they thought if they did this, then they could be like one of his proxies, like one of his little
Right. They thought
friends.
The documentary goes into this more deeply, but yes, it was this it's sort of part of it was they were afraid that he was going to hurt them and their families if they didn't.
Right.
But part of it also was a way to win favor, to win the respect and admiration of the Slender Man.
Right.
Sort of like you would do for a god. You would make a sacrifice to a god.
Right. Right.
Well, like I said, this kind of kickstarted a panic. And in June 2014, a woman in Cincinnati, Ohio, stated her 13-year-old girl had been attacked with a knife.
Oh my God.
And she had also been writing dark fan fiction about the Slender Man, and her mother says that this is what motivated the attack.
Oh no.
A girl from Richley, Florida was said to have been inspired by the Slender Man when on September 4th, 2014, she allegedly set her house on fire while her mother and 9-year-old brother were inside. And then in 2015, there was a cluster of suicide attempts made by young people between the ages of 12 and 24.
Oh, my God.
On the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And the Slender Man was cited as an influence. The president of the Oglala Sioux tribe sorry if I messed that up, stated that the Slender Man is very similar to what he defined as a suicide spirit that is very prominent in many Native American cultures.
Oh, interesting.
Which brings me to something.
Yes.
Obviously, you think about it. You know, we how many folklore, how many urban legends can be pinpointed exactly to a specific date? June 10th,
right?
2019. Obviously, you would think this is open and closed, right?
Be like, this is obviously it.
This is obviously not real, but there's a possibility that it is something else. Something I want to talk about today. This idea, this concept, is referred to as a tulpa.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what a tulpa is in the paranormal world is this: a magical creature that attains corporeal reality, having been originally merely imaginary. Right. Essentially, tulpas are supernatural beings that are created by the concentrated collective thoughts about and belief in the specific entity. So, Slender Man, possibly black-eyed kids.
Right. Maybe that's a tulpa.
Man.
They're tulpa.
So essentially, you know, for the sake of the podcast, we're going to approach it from this angle, a tulpa. So yeah, maybe he was created in a forum on June 10th or whatever it was, 2009. But is it possible the collective belief in this thing, the collective...
Like all of this energy pouring into it?
Right, all of this energy pouring into it, does it then create a Slender Man?
And it also makes you wonder, too, even if you are like, okay, there is no such thing as a Slender Man, I don't believe in tulpas, whatever, you still got to say, okay, these things are happening. People are actually committing these crimes and doing these things in the name of Slender Man. So even if he doesn't exist in the physical way that we understand, things are being done in his name so much that it's like he exists in some way. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Where it's like, right, I think that's just like so important to note that it's like still frightening. And I just wish that Santa Claus could be a tulpa.
Absolutely. How come fucking Santa Claus
and the
can't
Easter
be
Bunny
made real?
Why can't the fun guys pop off in here?
Why can't the fun guys be made real?
I would die. My cousin was so upset when she found out that Santa Claus wasn't real that she threw up.
That's a bummer.
That has nothing to do with this. It's just kind of a funny story.
All right. Well, now that we've talked about tulpas and the concept of what tulpas are,
yes,
I want to look a little more closely at the actual description of the Slender Man and his behaviors.
Oh, sure.
Because I think it plays in to what a tulpa is. Now, I didn't want to just use like a Wikipedia thing, but I was able to find a website, fandom.com, that had a very concentrated writings on what he is, who he, you know, what
compiled
they think is
a lot of things.
Very compiled. Yeah. Right, exactly. Thank you, Mo. It said he often keeps his long, pale hands crossed politely behind his back or hanging loosely at his sides. His suit is black and sometimes portrayed as pinstripe in artwork, mostly. Mm-hmm. A common misconception is that he is Jack Skellington, which it makes sense. Kind of does look, yeah.
He really does look a lot like Jack Skellington.
That's actually a great point. I never thought about that, but he does. Sometimes he's described as having long coattails, which can flow in the wind and whatnot. And it said he also wears long dress shoes, which always seem to be shined and gleaming.
Okay.
Now, his behavior is something, because obviously we know, as we said, these stories don't contain a lot of violence or gore, so we don't really know what he does with these kids that he's believed to be kidnapping.
Right.
So this is what it describes in this article. It says, oftentimes it's reported or recorded that he can be found in sections of the woods. Like we said, he's typically near woods.
Right.
And these generally tend to be suburban.
Oh.
He's also been reported seen with large groups of children, and it's commonly thought that he resides in the woods.
Okay.
He doesn't seem concerned about being seen in daylight.
Okay.
It's often thought that he, sort of like Hat Man, that he enjoys stalking people who become overly paranoid about his existence, purposefully giving them glimpses of himself in order to further frighten them. For this reason, it seems like Slender Man very much enjoys psychologically torturing his victims, which would make sense about like how we said like shadow people. It seems that there are these things that show up because they want like a little hit. They need a little hit of fear.
Right. They need that energy from you to continue on whatever they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And not to say that's what Slender Man is, because with Slender Man, he's supposed to actually take people, unlike shadow people who don't. But also it's said often that he floats or drifts around rather than walks, which would obviously lend to him being more of an ethereal, supernatural being. But he's also apparently popped up in a lot of historical places.
That's what's so interesting about this. And it's like so many things that we've talked about,
Yeah.
have they've also had lots of current lots of different cultures have their own versions of these things, like black-eyed kids or shadow
Right.
people. And this is another one where it's like, even though we do know that Slender Man as we know him was made up by a person and was recently created,
Exactly.
there's so many things from cultures all over the world that have very similar things to him.
Exactly.
So it's kind of creepy.
Exactly. And it would seem that a lot of these tulpas, if that's what they are, their whole thing is feeding on fear. Because in a way, that's what creates them. It's this collective
Right.
fear of it that creates it. So naturally, it would feed on that fear.
Right.
So here's some places this website highlighted where images of him can be found.
Oh, no.
Brazilian cave paintings. The earliest argued reference to the legend is within the cave paintings found in the Serra da Capivara National Park in the northeast of Brazil. Sorry if I messed that up. Which are believed to date from as far back as 9000 BC.
Good Lord.
Yeah. These paintings show a strangely elongated character leading a child by the hand, but make no reference to extra appendages. Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Oh, okay.
The next known possible reference to the Slender Man comes from around 3100 BC in Lower Egypt, which references to the thief of the gods, or the thief of Kuk, K spelled K-U-K, becoming commonplace during the reign of Pharaoh Owazner.
A Wasner?
Pharaoh Owazner, spelled W-A-Z-N-E-R.
Oh.
Hieroglyphic carvings representing the thief were found in the pharaoh's tomb, who is rumored to have had some kind of encounter with the entity. The carvings resemble a strange figure with multiple upper limbs, one that has never been found in any other hieroglyphics that we know of.
Spooky, honey.
And then he also showed up in some famous German woodcuts.
There we go.
Renowned German woodcutter Hans Freckenberg created at least 2 woodcuts featuring the character he described as Der Ritter, which translates to, I guess, the knight, during the mid-16th century that were discovered in Haussburg Castle in 1883. Now, whilst Freckenberg was well known for his realistic depiction of human anatomy, something was unusual about these woodcuts.
Yeah.
These pictures featured a skeletal, multi-limbed character. Now, historians are unsure of the exact symbolic nature of the character, with some claiming that it is a personification of the religious wars that raged in Europe at the time, while others say it represents the mysterious plagues that have been believed to be the reason for the mysterious abandoning of the Haussburg Castle and the nearby village in 1543, which, as we know, apparently Slenderman, if he's not in the woods, likes to hang out in abandoned places.
Right.
However, many insist that Freckenberg was attempting to represent Der Grobmann, the tall man, which is what it translates to.
Right.
According to legend, he was a fairy who lived in the Black Forest. Bad children who crept into the woods at night would be relentlessly chased by Der Grobmann,
Oh, no.
who wouldn't leave them be until he either caught them or they were forced to tell their parents of their wrongdoing.
Okay.
Even then, there is a chilling account from an old journal dating back to 1702, which reads, "My child, my Lars, he is gone. Taken from his bed. The only thing that we found was a scrap of black clothing. It feels like cotton, but it is softer, thicker. Lars came into my bedroom yesterday screaming at the top of his lungs that the angel is outside. I asked him, what was he talking about? And he told me some nonsense fairy story about Der Grobmann. He said he went into the groves by our village and found one of my cows dead, hanging from a tree. I thought nothing of it at first, but now he's gone. We must find Lars, and my family must leave before we are killed. I am sorry, my son. I should have listened. May God forgive me."
Scary.
How horrible is that?
Weird.
Absolutely horrible.
Because that seems a little extreme for a parent just trying to scare their kids into not misbehaving.
Right, which is a thing common in all cultures.
And all time.
There's stories about things that'll eat you if you're not a good boy or girl. I mean,
Sure.
that's
Sometimes you gotta lie to your kids, I understand. But this seems extreme, that someone would make this up to be like, well, another kid was misbehaving and then
Right.
he died and the whole family had to run away and all that. Like, that
Right.
seems a little much.
Well, it lends itself to this whole notion of a tulpa. This thing that started as one thing, a fictional thing, is brought to life through the collective belief of people. It's creepy.
Or maybe this thing was never a tulpa. Maybe it's always existed.
Maybe it's always been there, and we just know it as Slender Man, but it's been,
It's been around.
It's been Der Grobmann. It's been all these various things.
Yeah. Very weird. Yeah. Very cool. Very weird. But I mean, and I think also too, some of the things we've talked about in the past, like the black-eyed kids,
Right.
and some of the shadow people, they have origins in lots of different cultures all over the world.
Exactly.
And I think that's similar with Slender Man too. Like, I think humans are just, for whatever reason, naturally afraid of things that have like really long, spindly extremities. So I think the fact that like Slender Man has really long arms, really long legs, and maybe has these like tentacle sharp fucking things popping off, it makes sense why we're afraid of that. And it makes sense that like people have always been afraid of things like that. You know, maybe there are other things in other cultures that are very similar to Slender Man.
Right.
But we do know that like this iteration at the very least was made up in this thing. But like, who knows, man, between tulpas and like all this other stuff, I don't know. It's scary. And if there are any kids listening to this right now, just know that if any person or being or whatever, in person, online, or otherwise, tells you that you have to do something or else they're going to do something to your family, or they tell you like, oh, this is a secret, you have to keep this secret. If you divulge this secret to anyone, like X, Y, and Z will happen. That's not true. And
That's
you can all
absolutely
literally
not true.
always not true, like for sure. And you always tell like a parent or a guardian or a teacher or a, you know, whatever. That's just my little PSA for the squad.
I mean, it's so hard to tell a child don't be afraid, because when you're a child, you're a child. I mean, and there's things we feel, but you're right. Don't ever give anyone that power over you, ever.
Because they literally don't have it.
They don't. They do not have it.
Even if Slender Man is real, even if Slender Man, all of our energy of thinking about him and everything has made him into a completely real thing, he can't do those things. He can't do those things to you.
Exactly.
So don't let him make you do shit that you don't want to do.
Exactly.
And that's all I have to say on it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Creep Street. My name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Citizens of the Milky Way, good night and goodbye.